The car idled in the gym parking lot while the morning light climbed slowly over the buildings, and for a long moment neither Daniel nor his sister Emily moved, as if stepping out would force them to admit why they were really there. The gym was already awake, glass windows glowing, people walking in with purpose, but inside the car there was a heavy silence that felt older than the day itself. Daniel watched his breath fog the windshield and thought about how strange it was to be back in his hometown after so many years, back beside the one person who knew him before life got complicated. Emily sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her gym bag pressed against her knee, her face calm but her eyes distant, as if she were looking at something far beyond the parking lot. They had planned this workout the night before with casual words and half smiles, pretending it was just a way to kill time before Daniel returned to Chicago, but both of them knew better. Emily had called him out of the blue a week ago, her voice steady but tired, and he had heard the truth between her words. She was lonely, and so was he. Daniel had ended a long relationship months earlier, a quiet breakup that left no clear villain but took something from him all the same, and even now he carried the dull ache of it in his chest, the sense that love had slipped through his hands when he wasn't paying attention. Emily, younger by 2 years but always the stronger one, had her own private disappointment, a life that looked fine on paper but felt stuck in place, like she was waiting for something that never arrived. As the engine hummed, Daniel glanced at her and almost spoke, almost said that he was glad she called, that he didn't know how much longer he could keep pretending he was okay, but the words stayed locked inside him. Emily shifted, finally breaking the silence by reaching for the door handle, then stopping, her fingers trembling just enough for Daniel to notice. The gym doors opened and closed in the distance, each swing a reminder that time didn't pause just because they were afraid to move. When Emily took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, Daniel followed, feeling as if he were crossing an invisible line, leaving behind the safety of silence. Inside the gym, the smell of rubber mats and metal filled the air, music pulsing softly, people lifting and running, all of them focused on their bodies, unaware of the quiet storms others carried inside. Daniel signed them in, his name flashing briefly on the screen like proof that he still existed somewhere, and as they walked past the mirrors, he caught a glimpse of himself beside Emily and barely recognized the man staring back. He looked older than he remembered, not just in his face but in his posture, like someone who had learned too many lessons the hard way. Emily moved ahead, confident on the surface, but Daniel saw the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided looking at anyone else, and he wondered how long she had been carrying that weight alone. They reached the stretching area and placed their bags down, moving with the ease of siblings who had shared space their whole lives, yet there was a new distance between them, shaped by years apart and things left unsaid. As they stretched, Daniel's thoughts drifted to late nights after his breakup, when the apartment felt too quiet and his phone stayed dark, when he wondered if loving someone deeply meant always risking this kind of emptiness. He remembered the last conversation with his ex, the calm voices, the polite sadness, the way they both knew it was over long before they said it, and the memory tightened his chest even now. Emily bent forward, tying her shoe, and for a second her face softened, revealing a sadness she usually hid behind humor and work, and Daniel realized she was fighting her own memories, her own what-ifs. They started walking toward the machines, the rhythm of their steps matching without effort, and Daniel felt a strange comfort in that, a reminder that some bonds survive distance and disappointment. The gym noise faded into the background as his thoughts sharpened, and he wondered if this workout was really about strength or if it was an excuse to be close to someone who knew him without explanation. Emily stopped near the treadmills and looked around, then laughed lightly, a sound that didn't quite reach her eyes, and said they should start slow, as if speed might uncover something they weren't ready to face. Daniel nodded, stepping onto the machine beside hers, and as the belts began to move, he felt his heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with exercise. He watched Emily from the corner of his eye, noticing how focused she looked, how she always pushed herself forward, and he thought about how unfair it was that the people who seemed strongest were often the ones holding the most pain. The pace increased, their breathing steady, and Daniel felt the familiar burn in his legs, grounding him in the present moment, pulling him out of his head just enough to feel alive again. Yet even as sweat formed and muscles worked, he couldn't escape the feeling that this morning was different, that something important was unfolding between them without words. He remembered childhood mornings when they raced bikes down the street, arguing and laughing, believing the world was simple and kind, and the memory hit him with unexpected force. Back then, he thought, heartbreak was something that happened to other people, something adults talked about in lowered voices. Now it lived in his chest, quiet but constant. Emily slowed her pace and glanced at him, her expression serious for once, and Daniel sensed she wanted to say something she had carried for a long time, but the moment passed as quickly as it came. They finished their warm-up and stepped off the machines, sweat cooling on their skin, and Daniel felt both relieved and unsettled, like he had opened a door he couldn't close again. As they walked toward the weights, he realized that coming to the gym together was never about fitness, it was about facing the things they avoided when they were alone. And standing there, surrounded by strangers chasing physical strength, Daniel understood that this day would test something deeper, something emotional, something neither of them had trained for, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for what would surface once the real workout began. They moved into the free weight area where the noise grew heavier and the air felt thicker, and without talking they chose benches close enough to see each other but far enough to stay inside their own thoughts, as if both needed that small space to breathe. Daniel wrapped his hands around a cold barbell and lifted, feeling the strain pull through his arms and chest, each rise and fall sharp and steady, while his mind raced faster than his body. Across from him, Emily worked through her sets with focus, her movements clean and controlled, yet something restless lived beneath that calm, a tension Daniel recognized from years ago when she tried to carry everything by herself. Between sets, they sat in silence, catching their breath, the sound of weights hitting the floor filling the gaps where words should have been. Daniel stared at the wall ahead, sweat sliding down his face, and thought about how loneliness followed him even in crowded rooms, how nights felt endless after the breakup, how he kept asking himself what he did wrong when there was no clear answer. Emily wiped her hands on a towel and glanced at him, then away, as if she were gathering courage. Finally, in a low voice meant only for him, she asked if he ever felt like life was moving forward without him, like everyone else had found a rhythm he somehow missed. The question landed hard, because it named the feeling he had been hiding, and after a brief pause he nodded, admitting that some days he felt stuck between who he was and who he was supposed to become. The honesty surprised him, but once it started, it was hard to stop. He told her how the relationship ended quietly, how there were no big fights, just a slow fading, and how that made it hurt more because there was nothing to blame. Emily listened without interrupting, her face soft, her eyes steady, and when he finished, she surprised him by smiling sadly and saying she understood more than he knew. She shared how she had given years to someone who never promised more than the present moment, how she waited for things to deepen, for plans to be made, and how one day she realized she was holding on to hope alone. As she spoke, her voice stayed calm, but Daniel heard the ache beneath it, the disappointment of loving carefully and still ending up hurt. Around them, people lifted heavier weights, talked loudly, laughed, but for Daniel and Emily the gym narrowed into a quiet circle where only their words mattered. They moved to the next exercise, passing plates back and forth, their timing natural, like they had done this all their lives, and Daniel felt a strange comfort in working alongside her, in knowing he didn't have to explain himself fully to be understood. Emily admitted she often wondered if she asked for too much, if wanting stability and real connection made her difficult, and Daniel shook his head, telling her it only meant she knew her worth, even if the world didn't always reward that. The pace of their workout stayed steady, almost fast, as if movement helped keep the emotions from spilling over, and each set felt like a release, a way to let go of thoughts that had been locked inside for too long. Daniel realized he had avoided talking about his feelings with friends, afraid of sounding weak, but with Emily the words came easier, shaped by shared history and trust. She laughed softly at one point, admitting that she came to the gym to feel strong when everything else felt uncertain, and Daniel understood that need deeply, the desire to build something solid when life felt fragile. As they rested again, sitting on the bench, Emily stared at the floor and confessed that some nights she lay awake wondering if love was always meant to hurt a little, if that quiet pain was just part of growing up. Daniel didn't answer right away, thinking about his own nights, the empty side of the bed, the memories that replayed without permission, and then he said that maybe love wasn't supposed to hurt, but learning what kind of love to accept sometimes did. The words surprised him, sounding wiser than he felt, but Emily nodded like they made sense. The conversation flowed between exercises, honest but careful, never crossing into places that felt unsafe, just enough to share the truth without breaking. Daniel noticed how speaking openly made his chest feel lighter, like releasing air from something overfilled, and he wondered why he had waited so long to let someone see this side of him. Emily seemed changed too, her posture easing, her movements less tense, as if naming her disappointment had taken some of its power away. They pushed through the final sets, muscles burning, breath heavy, and Daniel felt a deep respect for his sister, for her resilience, for the quiet way she faced her struggles without asking for praise. As they finished and wiped down the equipment, he realized that this workout had become something else entirely, a shared moment of truth carved out of an ordinary morning. Walking toward the next section of the gym, Daniel sensed that whatever happened next, this conversation had already shifted something between them, creating a bond strengthened not by effort or sweat, but by honesty, and he felt both grateful and uneasy, knowing that once truths were spoken, there was no going back to how things were before. They moved toward the mirrored wall where the light was brighter and every movement reflected back at them, and for the first time that morning both Daniel and Emily slowed down, as if the mirrors demanded honesty they could no longer avoid. Daniel adjusted the weights and caught his reflection by accident, seeing a man who looked steady on the outside but worn beneath the surface, and the sight unsettled him more than the heaviest lift. Emily stood nearby, stretching her arms, and when she looked up and met her own gaze in the mirror, something shifted in her expression, a mix of sadness and resolve that Daniel had never seen so clearly before. The mirrors showed more than bodies, they showed time, choices, and quiet sacrifices, and Daniel felt exposed in a way no conversation had managed to do. Emily broke the silence with a soft laugh that faded quickly, saying she barely recognized the girl she used to be, the one who believed effort always led to happiness. Daniel understood immediately, because he felt the same distance from his younger self, the version of him who believed love would always last if you cared enough. As they moved through their exercises, Daniel noticed how Emily pushed herself again, lifting with controlled strength, but now there was less tension and more purpose in her movements, as if she were reclaiming something she had lost. He followed her pace, muscles burning, breath sharp, feeling grounded by the physical effort while his thoughts raced ahead. Between sets, he leaned against the wall and studied the reflections of strangers around them, people focused on their own goals, unaware of the quiet turning point happening nearby. Emily sat on the bench and stared at the floor, then looked back up at the mirror and admitted she felt like she had paused her life waiting for someone else to be ready, and saying it out loud made her realize how much time had slipped away. Daniel felt a tight pull in his chest because her words echoed his own regret, the months he spent holding on to something that was already gone, hoping it would return if he waited long enough. He told her that sometimes letting go felt like failure, even when it was the bravest choice, and as he spoke, he saw his reflection straighten slightly, as if the truth gave him strength. Emily nodded, her eyes bright but steady, and said she was tired of feeling invisible in her own story, tired of shrinking her needs to keep peace. The pace of the workout stayed quick, movements efficient, no wasted motion, and Daniel realized the speed helped keep emotions from settling too deeply, like running ahead of a storm. He watched Emily in the mirror as she lifted, seeing not just his sister but a woman learning to stand fully in herself, and the sight filled him with pride and a quiet sadness for all the moments she had doubted her worth. Daniel pushed harder, feeling the strain ripple through his body, using it as an outlet for thoughts he couldn't yet shape into words, and for a moment everything narrowed to breath, effort, and reflection. When they paused again, Emily surprised him by smiling genuinely, saying she forgot how good it felt to show up for herself without apology, and Daniel felt something loosen inside him at her words. He admitted that after his breakup, he stopped trusting his own judgment, questioning every decision, wondering if he had missed signs or failed to be enough, and saying it aloud made the fear feel smaller. Emily listened closely, her reflection mirroring his seriousness, and told him that loving deeply was never a mistake, even when it ended, because it meant he showed up fully. Her words landed with unexpected force, and Daniel swallowed, realizing how rarely he allowed himself that kind of grace. The mirrors reflected their closeness now, not physical but emotional, two people standing side by side, sharing truths without trying to fix them. As they moved to the final exercises, Daniel noticed the way Emily's shoulders relaxed, the way her movements flowed more freely, and he sensed that this moment would stay with her long after the soreness faded. The gym noise faded again into the background, replaced by the steady rhythm of effort and breath, and Daniel felt present in his body for the first time in weeks. Emily glanced at him through the mirror and said quietly that she was scared of starting over, of choosing herself and ending up alone, and Daniel answered just as quietly that being alone wasn't the same as being lost, and sometimes it was the space needed to grow. The words surprised him with their calm certainty, and he wondered if saying them meant he was finally starting to believe them too. As they finished their last set, muscles shaking, Daniel felt a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity, like something heavy had been lifted from inside him as well. They stood together, catching their breath, surrounded by reflections that no longer felt harsh but honest, and Daniel realized the mirrors no longer showed weakness or regret, but resilience shaped by experience. Emily wiped sweat from her forehead and laughed, saying she felt stronger than when they walked in, and Daniel agreed, knowing the strength they found had little to do with muscle. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave the mirrored wall, Daniel felt a quiet fear settle in, the awareness that this moment of clarity might fade once real life rushed back in, and he wondered if they could carry this honesty with them beyond the gym. Walking away, he took one last look at their reflections growing smaller behind them, and he knew that whatever came next, this part of the morning had changed them both, leaving a mark deeper than anything the body would remember. They walked out of the gym together with tired bodies and lighter minds, the automatic doors sliding open as cool air met their skin, and for a moment both of them paused on the sidewalk as if leaving too quickly might break whatever had formed inside. The parking lot was brighter now, busy with cars coming and going, life moving forward without waiting, yet Daniel felt calmer than he had in months, like the noise inside his head had finally lowered. Emily stretched her arms and laughed softly, not the polite laugh she used around others but a real one, loose and unguarded, and she said she didn't remember the last time she felt this clear. Daniel smiled, leaning against the car, noticing how the tension had left her face, replaced by something steady and hopeful. They talked easily now, words flowing without effort, joking about how sore they would be tomorrow, how neither of them had lifted as much as they thought they could, and beneath the humor was a shared understanding that the workout had been about much more than strength. Emily admitted she had almost canceled that morning, afraid of sitting alone with her thoughts, afraid of realizing how unhappy she had been pretending not to be. Daniel told her he almost didn't come back home at all, worried that facing old places would bring back memories he wasn't ready to deal with, but standing there he was glad he did. They got into the car, windows down, sunlight cutting through the quiet, and as Daniel started the engine he felt a sense of direction he hadn't felt since before the breakup, not a plan but a willingness to move forward. Emily rested her head back against the seat and said she felt proud of herself for showing up, for not running from the truth, and Daniel told her she should be, because choosing honesty over comfort was never easy. As they drove, familiar streets passed by, places tied to childhood memories, and Daniel realized how much he had changed without noticing, how life had shaped him through loss as much as through love. Emily talked about wanting more for herself, not in a dramatic way, just small choices, clearer boundaries, trusting her instincts again, and Daniel listened closely, feeling grateful that she trusted him with that part of her. He shared his own quiet promise to stop measuring his worth by someone else's ability to stay, to rebuild confidence slowly, one honest step at a time. The conversation stayed gentle, supportive, never heavy, like they both understood the importance of protecting this fragile sense of hope. When they reached the house, they didn't rush inside, sitting in the car a little longer, as if neither wanted the moment to end too quickly. Emily turned to him and said that no matter where life took them next, they should keep checking in like this, not just when things fell apart, but when things were good too, and Daniel agreed without hesitation. He realized then that love didn't always arrive as romance or passion. Sometimes it showed up as loyalty, as presence, as someone standing beside you when you were learning how to stand again. They went inside, made coffee, talked about simple things, music, work, plans that didn't feel so heavy anymore, and Daniel felt a quiet warmth settle into his chest. The pain of his breakup hadn't vanished, and Emily's disappointment hadn't magically disappeared, but both felt smaller now, less powerful, like chapters instead of endings. As the afternoon light shifted through the windows, Daniel understood that healing wasn't a single moment but a series of choices, and that morning at the gym had been one of them. Emily teased him about leaving soon, about going back to his busy city life, and though the thought stirred a hint of sadness, it no longer felt sharp. They promised to keep moving forward, to keep choosing honesty, to keep showing up even when it was uncomfortable. Later, as Daniel packed his bag, he reflected on how close he had come to staying silent, to carrying everything alone, and how easily this moment could have never happened. Emily hugged him before he left, a simple, steady embrace, and whispered that she was glad he was her brother, glad they found each other again in this unexpected way. Driving away, Daniel felt something close to peace, not because everything was solved, but because he no longer felt lost. He knew there would be hard days ahead, moments of doubt and loneliness, but now he also knew he didn't have to face them alone, and that knowledge felt stronger than any muscle he had trained. As the road stretched out in front of him, Daniel smiled, thinking about how one ordinary workout had turned into something meaningful, a reminder that even in the middle of heartbreak and uncertainty, connection could still be found, and that sometimes the strongest thing a person could do was simply show up, tell the truth, and keep going.